now.
Good morning and thank you for joining me in class. My name is Kaya. I am from Westmarch. I am a master garber here, and today we are going to be learning to make Viking hoods. Now, if you haven't already, go to Alona's website and get the tutorial. This is just a PDF that I've written out, and today we're going to start going step by step through it. The only thing that I pre-did was I pre-cut the fabric, but we're going to just briefly go over that. Tools you will need are a sewing machine, ironing board, some pins, a hand sewing needle and thread, fabric marker, and yeah, that's it for equipment. For materials, you'll need a half a yard of inner and outer fabric along with matching thread. Now, something I want to bring up is that if you do live in a warmer climate, feel free to just do one layer and you can either hem the bottom of it or you can use like ribbon or something, a trim, and then just hem the inside of it. Or you can use bias tape and then face the inside of it so that it's not bulky or you're just like in Florida dying of the heat and the humidity. But you can still look fabulous. Okay, so to begin, we're going to be looking at the cutting chart. Cutting this is very easy. I designed this to be using up the majority of a yard and a half. If you have 60-inch wide fabric, you only need a yard, but if it's the usual 42 to 45, yard and a half it is. Now I've already cut my fabric and I've got black for the interior. So I've got two 15 by 15 inch squares and two 18 by 36 rectangles in the inner and the outer fabric. So this is my outer fabric, nice and bright here. So after you've cut everything, you don't actually need to wash your fabric for this. I mean, some people will gasp at the idea, but it is really straight lines and it's not going to relax that much out of shape because all of your sides are going to be stabilized with thread and actually the interior fabric. So, I mean, if you just pick up your fabric, you want to do it today, go right ahead. I do, however, recommend that you do iron it off the bolt. Okay, we're going to move over to my sewing machine where we'll go and take a close look at what we're doing. One moment. Okay, so to start, we are going to actually be not sewing, but we are going to start by marking our fabric. And we're going to take the 15-inch squares. And I like using an acrylic ruler and this is actually a gel pen. Gel pen I find shows up really well on dark fabrics, and you can either rub out the line by smudging it with a wet cloth, or you can just wash it out. It will come right out. And I've even left it on for like months. It still comes out, but you want to use the glitter pen, not the white pen. So if you look at the directions, you're going to want to make a line at one corner, in one corner, a quarter of an inch. You're going to find where that intersects near the corner on all four of your 15 by 15 inch pieces, because when we sew this, we're only going to sew to that point so that when we do the other side of that corner, it will end up being really easy to just go ahead and sew together. So I'm going to start with that. What I'm doing is I'm just lining this up with the corner. I'm just making a line. And I'm going to sew to where they intersect. That'll make sense once we start sewing in a moment. I want to make sure it's really nice and easy to see. And you know what? I just realized you want to do this on the inside, not the outside. So let me grab a dark pen for this one because it's lighter on the inside. So we sew on the wrong side of the fabric. Better realize this now than when sewing, right? There we go. That one's done. And remember, an ounce of preparation is worth a pound of work. So we always want to prepare things as much as we can before we start sewing. So I'm going to use the gel pen on the black fabric. Which I chose black for this because it's a galaxy fabric, and you know, this is the inside, so it's kind of like a black hole. Okay. This one, see how you can see that line so clearly on black. It's easier than using a chalk or anything else I find. Come right out. And even if you do end up using a pen that doesn't come right out, don't worry about it. This is the inside. You just want to make sure it won't bleed into your fabric. So some ball points will. Okay, so next, my pin cushion, we are going to start pinning things together. So we're on to page 2. Okay. So to start, you're going to take, and we're going to do the exact same thing for each side fabric. So I'm going to work with one side for right now. We're going to take our rectangles and put the short sides of them together. We're going to just pin these together real quick. And this is going to be the top of our hood. And some people might be like, oh, I don't need to pin it. It's fine if you don't want to. I just find it makes it easier to line things up when I am working. Makes it go a little faster. Okay, and then on the bottom, we're going to choose one side and we're going to put the square down at the bottom, and then you're going to want to make sure that the lines that you just made are towards the top. That would be the side that we just pinned together, that is lined up towards that side, so that you know that you're going to be doing 3 seams at once while pinning, and then we're going to take the rest of it together. Now, the back is going to be a little bit different because you have to, when you put these in, you have to make a small kind of hole where you don't sew, so that your entire hood can be turned right side out afterwards. There is a little bit of hand sewing with this project, but don't fear, it's really easy. Okay, after you've done that, if you look at the diagram, you're going to go pin your other square to the exact opposite side, so that when we fold this together, they're going to be on different sides. So I'm just going to go to the other side of this, find the other side of my big rectangle, and we're going to pin this in. Same thing again, we're going to locate where we had made our marks, and we're going to make sure that's towards the top of the hood, so that when we sew this, it's going to be really stinking simple. Put 3 to 5 pins, whatever you're comfortable with. I like to do half and half again. Okay. So that side's done. We're going to put that aside because, again, we're going to try to be as efficient as we can with this. So we're going to do the other sides together real quick. Equal cat hair on there. So what's nice about this, you can hand stitch this if you want. It is a garment that does not need any serged edges. So you do not have to worry about finishing your seams. They're all going to be tucked inside. Just pin the same thing to itself. That's what I get for not shaking everything out. See, Even masters make some errors sometimes. It's okay. I one time was showing someone how to put in a sleeve. They managed to twice under my supervision put the sleeve in incorrectly. That's when I learned pinning before sewing is like the way to go with these things. It's much easier to unpin than it is to take out a seam. That is why we're pinning today. If you want to roll without pins, go right ahead though. Okay, there we go. So this fabric is a plain fabric, unlike the galaxy weave. So that means that we are going to have to be really careful to make sure that we pin everything correctly. So I'm going to find my marks and I'm going to make sure that I look at where my pins are because I want to make sure that I pin this on the correct side of this fabric. Otherwise, you know, we're going to be back at that place where we're going to have to unstitch some seams. If you're using a fabric for the inside and the outside that does have a wrong and a right side, then it'll make your life easier. But if you're just using plain fabric, you are going to want to really pay attention to what side you are sewing on. Okay. And I'm just using my interior fabric Sakona cotton and the exterior is just a quilter's cotton. Okay, so looking at this, so over that direction is where I had just put in the first square of fabric. Here is the pins, and then I'm going to make sure that I get to the exact opposite side to put in my other square, which is going to be this side. Finding my marks. Here we go. There we go. Okay, so I'm just going to hold this up, make sure that it looks right. It does. Now we get to sew. Okay, I am using a Brother. This is a Project Runway limited edition. So this will do a number of stitches. Today, we're just going to be using a plain straight stitch that is set to 1/4 inch. So I've got my handy dandy acrylic ruler and I am literally going to actually check to make sure that I have it on the 1/4 inch. I think it's really good to always check to make sure you're consistent in your stitches, because if you have to put down this project, I'm going to go down, make sure it meets the 1/4 inch. If I have to walk away from this project and I have to turn this off, this machine will actually reset all of its stitch settings that I have made. So I'm going to start with the black because it's on my table. Okay, and I am going to start with the top of the hood first, the closing at the top. And I'm sorry, this is about to get loud. And I'm going to come in a few stitches and then I'm going to reverse.
It's not that bad. It's not that loud.
Oh, okay, good. Actually, this is not the top. This is one of the squares. Luckily, everything's marked out. You're still going to want to go back and forth. I'm surprised this isn't that loud. This is actually its high settings.
It sounds like it's like compensating for itself. Like the microphone is like, no, I'm not doing this now.
Okay. when you get to right here where your marks are, you are literally going to want to sink your needle into where these two lines intersect and then back up so that it can really just tack down that edge, because when you go next up the other side, you're going to want to make sure that you can lay that flat easily and you won't have a problem. Okay, so one side done. And here's the hood top. And this is pretty much one size makes all. My husband's about 6'1", and he easily can wear this. It is a little big for me. I'm only 5 feet tall. So if you want to make it bigger or smaller, it's really easy to do by just like shrinking it down an inch here and there. Going reverse. Now this is the top of the hood, so I'm going to go all the way. There we go. And now last side of this. Now, if you have these like threads that are kind of like loose, I wouldn't worry about that. These are all going to be encased when you line it. You will be doing that a little bit. Right to my mark. Further. And back up. Okay, one side done. Next side. I'm just going to find a pin and start sewing, which this is top of the hood. This one's turning down. Bobbin tension has come off. To say I know my bobbin can't be out because you should always start your projects with a fresh bobbin so that you're not going to play chicken. Just do it. There we go. And never sew over your needles. That is a good way to break a needle, mess up your machine, and maybe catch a needle that's shattered to the eye. It's happened before.
We actually do have a question.
Sure. What's up?
Josh is asking, our Cookie Monster, what is a good sewing machine for a beginner?
Honestly, I particularly like Brother as a brand in general. But
yeah,
you honestly only need, and I did teach a tunic class where we didn't use a serger at all. You need just a sewing machine that can do a straight stitch and a zigzag stitch. When I bought this machine, I was in the market for a better machine. So I didn't go with the basic Brother model, but basic machines will last you a number of years as long as you upkeep them. And I mean, you vacuum all the stuff that gets underneath out, you change your needle frequently, you oil your machine, you keep it in good running order. That will have my machine before this was a very basic brother model. I spent maybe $80 on, and I had before that spent like $60. It was $80, but I couponed a crumb out of it. You can easily get, usually there's a sewing machine with Amazon Prime deal every year. I looked at Walmart just this week, and it was $60 for a very basic Singer machine. So, I mean, it's really, how much are you willing to spend? If you want to only spend $40 on one of those little dinky machines, I mean, it will last you decently, but I wouldn't really rely on the tension being good for anything like applique. If you're doing a straight stitch, if you're making one of these and that's all you're making, you could be okay with that. So I would aim for a price point of like under 100, but above 50 for a sewing machine, and you can get a pretty decent one.
Yeah.
I'm just using black thread. You won't be able to really see it within the pattern of the Galaxy fabric. It's nice when you have an interior and exterior fabric that use the same color thread. Because then you don't have to change threads. But even then, if you want to make the entirety of the interior and then the entirety of the exterior, you're only changing colors once, because when we do actually join these together, it doesn't matter which color the interior or the exterior thread that you use, because it will match one side and so it'll be hidden by that one side. Going straight to where my lines intersect and reversing. Up we go. Okay. So now that I've done all my pieces are together in their color, we are now going to flip these, and we're going to actually be deciding now which one's the front and which one's the back. So for the front one, we're just going to be connecting this square to the other rectangle. But for the back one, we are going to be doing the square to the other side of the rectangle, and then we're going to sew up the back of the rectangles. So I'm going to start pinning, and then when we get to the interior fabric, that's going to be the moment we just actually need to add the hole to it. And what I do is I do 2 pins in the spacing that I need to remind myself to stop, because it's just a little reminder. Okay. And this is pretty easy to pin, because I'm just going to hold it up by the top of the hood. I'm going to just start pinning. Also, I'm going to tell you, if for some reason one of your rectangles turns out to just be a little bit too long, just either ease the fabric a little bit, or I mean, you can literally just trim it down on that one side. It won't really matter to your end product, and it's pretty easy to fudge it if you need to. You just kind of still sew in a straight line, but you might have, like, instead of a 1/4 of an inch gap on one side, you're going to have a little bit more, and that's fine. This is a really good easy beginner project, because if something like that happens, it's so not the end of the world. Okay, this is going to be my front, so I'm only going to pin the square. Lay this down so that I can pin it. We're going to sew this square from this point down, because we only need to sew from that join. And we're going to make sure we sink our needle into the same hole, so that as the old line of stitches, so that we make sure that they don't have a gap in between them. Okay. So we're going to actually start with that side. Now I didn't put the needle directly through it because I didn't put like my pin, but I'm going to put the needle directly through it and then remove it. So I'm going to start by lowering my needle straight into the same line of stitches. And then I'm just going to go forward a couple of stitches. And then I'm going to go back, straight back down into that hole. And then I'm going to start sewing. That's really how you want to make sure there is no gap in the hood. Okay, now for the other side, the back side of it, where's the back? We are going to start at the top and work our way down, because we do want to sew right over this line so that we can make sure we do catch straight into that seam that we had sewn previously, so that we also do not have a gap right there. And if you're like me and you just pin on the wrong side, don't worry, just pull your pins up enough so you can see the heads, and then that will allow you to know when to pull them out, and that's fine. You do not need to go back and forth because that's already sewn. Take this out. If you're taking out your pins like I just did while your machine's sewing, just be really careful. Okay, so I have come up to this point where my seam is. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to fold this side under so that it is totally straight, and we're going to just sew over that and make sure that we get through the exact same hole that we previously did. There we go. So it's just as simple of keep scooting your fabric to the edge and then make sure that you catch that seam that you last did. Okay. Okay, so that is this side. We've got something that's actually looking like a wig now. So if you are going to be adding any kind of decoration, applique or anything like that, now might be a good time to add it. This is already really busy, the snuggie applique. But if your decoration is smaller, like I usually put them on the front squares or the back squares, if it doesn't have to bridge to like over the shoulder seams, then do your applique before you even start this. That would just be the easier way to go. Okay, move back. Okay, so I'm going to pin this, and this is going to be the back of it. So I'm going to first pin the hood, starting with that, and then we're going to pin the mantle. Okay, so again, I'm going to pin right near where these two pieces, all three pieces join. And this is where we've got to really think about how we need to leave a gap in our stitching, because that gap is going to be how we turn this entire thing right side out after we sew together at the bottom. So I'm going to do one there. And usually I like to put it about 3 to 4 inches from the bottom. So to remind myself of what I'm supposed to be doing, I'm going to put 2 pins right here. So about 4 inches from the bottom, 2 pins to remind myself I have got to leave that gap. And I recommend leaving a gap of 3 to 4 inches. I wouldn't leave anything bigger than that because you are going to have to hand sew it, but I would not leave anything smaller than that because then you're going to have some trouble turning the entire thing right side out. And that is a job within itself. Okay, so the back's pinned. I'm going to do the front now. By the way, if you are using linen, I would probably do a 1/2 inch seam. It does tend to unravel a little bit more. Or you could finish your edges. I would still probably use a bigger seam allowance, but you could easily do this with linen. And linen's actually really nice. I've got a couple of linen ones, and I've got particularly one that's lined with flannel, and I used some Scotch Guard to help weatherize it, and that thing will keep my tunic dry at the shoulders when it rains. It is fabulous. Okay, sewing machine back. And this is what I'm using here. This is actually a quilter's attachment. So this just slides off. And I do have one of those things that slides right down here. I tend to like using this because if I'm doing just a flat straight seam, it gives me more room to prep on this side to make sure everything's nice and flat. Sorry. Okay, so again, we are going to start right at the front, and we're going to just sink our needle down to where the stitches were from our last line. Okay, go up a couple, go back a couple. Okay, on to the other side. Remember, you want to, when you do up the back, you want to make sure you're on the side that you can see where your lines are when you get to it. So, and remember, since the top of this is already stitched, you don't need to back up on these stitches. Okay, so again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just fold this out with the fabric for the rectangle, just folded so that everything is a straight line still, so we don't have a gap. And we're going to make sure we catch that last stitch that I did for the other side of this square. There we go. Okay, so next thing that we need to remember, double pins means that we need to leave a gap here. And when you do that, you're going to want to go all the way to this and then back up a couple of stitches to secure that. Okay, so just about there. Okay, back up a couple of stitches. And then we're just going to raise all the way to the other side without stitching. Go down a couple of stitches, go back a couple of stitches, secure that opening. All the way to the end. Yep. Okay, so now you have two hoods basically. At this point, if you wanted to just leave this as two hoods, what I would do for the opening is use some bias tape to go around the opening, fold it to the inside to really give you a nice seam, and then sew that, and then you can literally just do the trim. If you look at how this is, and I'll use the top piece, you actually only have two straight lines. You've got your 45-degree angles at the front and the back, but otherwise it's just two big straight lines. That's really great. If, like, let's say you wanted to use a trim, and what I would do is I would fold this with iron and then sew this down so that you could maybe do that. So it's a really simple project. If you would just want to make one of these that's only one-sided, you might then also want to like zigzag stitch the raw edges to give that a nice clean finish. Or you could do it with a serger, but I mean, when you get into like a point where it binds 3 points together, that might be a little difficult. But it's really like you could just stop here and have two hoods. And I saw Shelly mention fleece. You don't even need to finish the edges then. So, and fleece is really good at keeping them waterproof. All right. So for this project, we need to turn one side inside out and one right side out. So I'm doing my exterior fabric as the one that is inside out, and I'm doing the interior fabric right side out. And we are going to line up and pin the opening first. You always want to start with the opening because that is the fiddly bit, and you won't be able to turn it right side out and then do the hood. Like, don't even try it. Okay, so I've just stuffed it through. Here is our hood opening. Here's the black hole. And what we're going to do is we're going to start by pinning the top of it. And I like to put 2 pins here because if you try to, like, I'm going to fold the selvages different ways so that one's going on one way and the other one's going the other, so that your sewing machine is only going to be going through 4 layers of fabric at a time. Otherwise, you are going to be going through 6 layers of fabric. Some sewing machines cannot handle that, and I wouldn't recommend it. Let's be nice to our sewing machines. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is shake this into place, and I'm going to pin 1 pin through the squares. And I'm going to line up the squares because that is where it's important. So I want my pin to literally just, you'll see their little tags right here, the little points of the squares. And we're just going to pin right through that square at the top and underneath before they join. Great. Okay, so I'm going to put a couple of pins into the hood, making sure everything's pretty lined up. Okay. Go ahead and make my life easier in the end. I mean, easier, not only is it going to tell me that I'm on the right track for keeping my fabric, you know, the bottom fabric in your sewing machine actually pulls at a different rate than the top. So this is going to help make sure that everything's kind of aligned. It also lets me make sure like the seams on the top of my hood are aligned, so which looks pretty. I'm going to take off this because we're actually going to be like working a hole around it. I am going to start and stop at the front square. And how we're going to do that is carefully. We are going to very, very carefully, because we only have 1/4 of an inch where things can kind of be wonky. We're going to put our needle straight down through where all of those stitches join. And then, again, using that same method we did earlier, our fabric's going to be kind of folded underneath the selvage, just that 1/4 of an inch, because we've already caught everything, but then you have this waste selvage, the waste fabric that is your selvage. And we're just going to go a couple of stitches, reverse a couple of stitches, and then go. The more you do that, and the more you make these, the more easy, just the easier that gets, honestly. Like you're going to be nervous that first time. Don't worry, just do it. And ironing can really straighten out that seam through the puckering. Okay, again, we're going to make sure that our selvages are going into opposite directions. Yeah. Only sewing through 4 instead of 6 layers is good. Rotating this. Okay, we're about to come back to the bottom seam. So again, we're going to make sure that everything is kind of straightened out so that we make sure that we catch that stitch. And as we get closer, you might have a fabric that wants to kind of like bunch. So I'm going to put my hand in and kind of keep that in place until I get to where I actually need everything to line up. Because you want to make sure you actually sew and don't have a hole. So I'm going to make sure I don't catch additional fabric and then just go straight down. Stitches. Okay, moment of truth, because now we're going to turn this right side out. I do mean we're right side out, like we would wear it, but I know that there's still, you know, the bottom we have to do together, but that's where the magic is about to come in. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to inspect this. Got a couple of threads that are coming through that are, yeah, you don't really have to trim your threads either. I forgot to mention that. Like they're all on the inside. We'll give it one good go over afterwards. But if you look, let me see if I can get that. If you look, everything's kind of come together. Like you see that there's a few stitches here, but that's all because there's overlapping stitches. So that's fine. Okay, so we're going to unbunch the inside fabric. You haven't already done this? Okay, this is the magic. What you're going to do is your front, here's the opening of the hood. Going to grab the front 2 corners of your bottom point, of the points that are in the front, and you're going to turn this inside out so that they're back together with the wrong sides out. And you're going to make you're going to start sewing down one side and making almost like a bag that has all the right side material on the inside. And we're going to encase this. And it's really simple. And I don't pin this part because your fabrics end up going to becoming kind of a Mobius, where it's just going to be wrapped up inside itself. So it's really hard to pin all the way. If you want to pin one side and then the other, you can probably get away with it, but I do not. I'm going to put this back on so that's easy. Okay, we're going to, and remember, this is actually really easy because it's only 2 straight edges, and you don't have to remember anything like leaving a gap because we've already left that gap in the back of the interior fabric. And that means that you don't have to sew an edge together that someone might see. It's going to be on the inside. And if you iron everything before sewing that together by hand, it gives you a nice good clean stitches that will relax naturally to their place. As we get to our first joins, remember you want your seams to go 2 different directions. Bottom one goes this way, top one goes that way, so that you're only stitching through 4 layers, not 6 layers. And the reason why we have the bottom one pointing towards us is because that's an easier way for your feed to make it through. You're going to kind of like mess around with it in order to get it to come out correctly. And I just go to the next one and I hold these together. Just using tension and kind of just fiddling with it to get all of your fabric lined up. You know what? Back a little bit. So I was an 1/8 inch off, and I don't want to be. There we go. Okay, and now we're coming to the other side. I'm just going to sew straight off of this side and then not worry about just setting my needle in and then turning. I'm just going to pull all the way out and start again. Turn 45. As you can see, we're starting to get kind of wrapped up within ourselves. But if we start pulling things, we'll eventually find the other corner. So that's where we've been sewn. So now we've got our straight seam on this side. There we go. My thread somehow looped itself, so I'm just going to turn that off. There we go. Okay. Got just about 2 more feet to go. Actually, 3 feet-ish. Okay, almost there. Okay, so now remember that hole that we left? We're going to go locate that, because that is going to be where we pull this whole mass through. What I'll do is I look for my corners. There we are. Okay, so you got this little hole that you're going to try to pull this whole thing through. Start with finding the hood and pulling that through first. That's going to be your biggest amount of fabric if you pull that through first. So I'm just going to very gently rotate while pulling. Like I won't get stuck on just like, I have to get this single part out. I will just rotate and pull gently every part. And like, if it gives a little, great. If it doesn't, I'm going to leave that part be. Okay, so you can see we're starting to get more of this. Again, pulling and rotating. And if it gets harder, just like move on to a different spot. Like it might be caught on something. You might not have just like loosened up the right bit for more to come out to come through that hole, which is fine. Ta-da! Pulled the hood through. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to line things up. What I like to do, grab the top of a ballpoint pen, or since I always have a screwdriver, what I'll do is I will fluff out all the points, iron this bad boy, and then using a ladder stitch, which you can find plenty of directions on YouTube of how to do, I will close up that hole that we have left in the back. See, if you use this, just ease it, get a nice, great little point. Also, if you feel free to like clip the edges on the inside for your corner, front, back, and point at the hood, so that if you really want to get like a nice clean point, you can. Otherwise, it'll be slightly rounded, but you know, who's going to be looking that closely? So after I turn all my points out, I would take this over to the ironing board, iron all the edges so that you get some nice crisp edges, and then iron the opening. And you really want to iron the opening flat with the seam allowance on the inside, so that when you do the ladder stitch to this, it will be really clean, flat finish. So, well, that's it. Congratulations on making a hood. If you have any questions, feel free to message me. I feel like Kelly has probably tagged me in things, but you have officially made a hood. Congratulations. Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Really appreciate it. All right, I'm going to stop live and stop recording.
Awesome.